Hey, it's Mary. Welcome to my channel where I attempt to share the things that I've learned on my writing journey that could possibly help you on yours. I have been writing for almost 5 years. Oh, actually 5 years, a little over 5 years. Well, I mean, technically I've been writing since I was a toddler, but I meant with the intention of possibly actually finishing a book. And like I've said, I learned a lot. I have built up my skill a little bit. I'm not saying I'm the best in the world, please don't get that, but I have learned a lot. There are some things that I still struggle with, however, and that brings me into the topic of the video, confusing words and how to tell them apart. There are a lot of words out there that are confusing and might trip people up. They're not entirely sure which word to use in which context, and I get it. I understand it. I've been there. I am still there sometimes. Whether it be because the pronunciation of the word is the same, or the definition is similar, or maybe it's the same word and it's just different spellings, who knows? We're going to get into them. We're going to see what the difference is, if there is any difference, and whether or not you understand the difference between these words. So the first one, I'm going to start pretty easy, is accept and accept. This one is confusing because they sound the same. They have wildly different meanings and they're not interchangeable at all, unlike some of the other words we're going to get into. Despite that, a lot of people still get them mixed up. So let me first go over what kind of word they each are. So accept is a verb, but it is also a preposition and a conjunction. Basically, it means to exclude. Accept, on the other hand, is solely a verb, and it is to say that you willingly receive something, or you willingly allow something to happen. You're condoning something. So if you're still struggling to understand, let me try to explain it with example sentences. For accept, the big A, you could say, do you accept this token of my love? Do you willingly receive this token of my love? Pretty simple, right? Or, for accept, you could say, I enjoyed every song in the play except for the last one. Or would it be a musical? I enjoy every song in the musical except for the last one. Because it's the last one you didn't like. You are showing, you're excluding that from the list that you like. And like I said, this one was really simple, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I just wanted to make it clear for other people, because there are people who get it mixed up, and that's okay. They sound the same. The next example is lie versus lay. This one is where it gets a little bit more confusing, just a teeny bit. I bet you can guess why it's confusing. It's because it's technically the same word. It is the same verb of something laying down. And not only that, but they're both verbs. So the word lie, not as in you're telling a lie, but just to lie down, L-I-E, is, like I said, a verb, and it means to recline or to rest on a surface. Lay, however, is also a verb, but it means to put or place something. I guess you could kind of equate it to sat and set. So when you sat down, you are referring to you are referring to an action done by you, whereas when you set something, you are doing an action to something. Let me give you sentence examples and then I will explain further. So for lie, you say, I want to lie down, or I need to lie down. For lay, it would be, can you lay this on the table? Can you lay the baby down? Then versus than might be another one that's obvious to you, but it's not obvious to everyone. And in fact, there are some instances in where you might be going back and forth about which one to use, but this one is actually really easy to differentiate. Then with an E is an adjective. No, sorry, adverb. I don't know why I said adjective. It's an adverb. And it's used to identify time or a change in time. Then with an A is a conjunction, and it's specifically used to show comparison or contrast. Here are the sentence examples. Back then, things were very different. You're using then because it's describing a change in time, and you're specifically focusing on that change in time. For than, with an A, you could use this example. Rather than going to Chicago like I planned, I went to New York. So those are two examples for the words. However, things get confusing when you have a sentence like, I drink less alcohol than I used to. Because now you are describing a little bit of a change in time, right? So maybe you should use the word then with an E. However, in this instance, you would still use then with an A, than, because Your focus in the sentence is not on the change in time, but on the comparison of behaviors. So I hope that clears it up for you a little bit. This is one where I've had a little bit of trouble with in the past, and it's more clear now as I've really focused on learning the difference, but I understand it can be confusing. That and which. This is one that is also kind of confusing. I feel like I'm saying that on every single one, but there's a reason why I'm making this video, because they're confusing. So that is for identifying a specific thing in a clause, whereas which is for added information. It's for extra bonus information that's not necessary to understanding the sentence. I'm going to say two sentences. I want you to think about what each sentence is implying based on the word I use. I ate the cupcake that had vanilla frosting. I ate the cupcake which had vanilla frosting. What came to mind when I said those two sentences? Typically, when somebody were to say something like the first sentence, I ate the cupcake that had the vanilla frosting, the fact I ate the cupcake that I ate was specifically because it had vanilla frosting. Whereas the other sentence implies that the fact the cupcake had vanilla frosting was irrelevant to the reason why I chose it. I just picked a cupcake and it had vanilla frosting. Also, another difference is that you always use a comma before which, never before that. That's not to say you should never put a comma before that, but I'm saying in this context, which has a comma, that does not. Who and whom. I'm excited for this one. I'm sure this is a question that a lot of you have had in the past. What do I use? Who? Do I use whom? Do I even need to use whom? Like, we use who all the time in our conversations, in our daily speech, in our writing. We don't use whom that much, but there is a difference, and I want to explain why. So who is a subject pronoun. It is a pronoun you use for person when the person is the subject of the sentence. It's for asking which person does or says something. Whom is an object pronoun, and it's for asking which person receives an action when the person you're talking about is not the subject of the sentence. So, who is she? Who is he? Who crashed the car? Whoever opened the bottle is going to be in trouble. Who lives by the sword will die by the sword. For whom, you have, whom did you pick for the role of Dorothy? To whom did he give the money? From whom were you given those earrings? Notice that in all of these sentences, the subject of the sentence is not the person who you are asking about, but it's the person who did the action. That's why whom is an object pronoun and who is a subject pronoun. Who is for asking who did the action. Whom is for asking who was the action done to. Here's another example of a way that you could view this. I don't use this method. I just saw it on Tumblr, and I know a lot of people thought it was very helpful, so here you go. And then last but certainly not least, we have farther and further. This is another one that up until recently I really struggled with, even though I did look into the difference and I tried to understand the difference. But I have come to the definitive conclusion of what the difference is, and I'm here to share it with you. So, farther, with the A, is an adverb used to describe literal distance. It is a term for describing physical distance. Meters, feet, inches, miles, kilometers, if you're in a different part of the world. Further, with the letter U, it's also an adverb, but it's for describing figurative distance, non-physical distance, such as a stretch in time. Further study will illuminate the answers more clearly. Let's not fight any further. There's room for further improvement. On the flip side, I walked farther than I planned to. I ran farther than I ever have before. How much farther is it to the rest stop? As you can see, further, you're describing something that is not always physical, but maybe figurative. And then on farther, it's always going to be very specific to physical distance, a literal distance. So in that way, further can be more widely used. It can be more vague, more generic. Farther is not. Here's a little tip that I came up with that I use, and it's not perfect, so take it with a grain of salt. But if you can replace the word with more, and it makes just as much sense, if not maybe more sense for our modern ears, then you're probably going to want to use the word further, whereas maybe not always with farther. And it's because farther, like I said, is a specific word. And when you have a specific word, it becomes more niche and it's harder to interchange with synonyms that might not have quite the same meaning. So for instance, if I were to say, more study would illuminate the answer more clearly, it would make total sense, just as much sense as if I were to say, further study. Same thing with, let's not fight anymore, or there's room for more improvement. Those make sense. It doesn't become ambiguous. You're still saying the same thing. Whereas sometimes, that's not always true for farther. If I were to say, I walked more than I planned to and I had to run home for dinner, you could still understand the meaning of my sentence. Same thing with, I ran more than I ever have before, but farther would technically be a better word because you're specifically saying in distance. And that gets to the point of what you're meaning much faster and much more clearly than the word more does. And if you have a sentence like the last one I gave, how much farther is it to the rest stop? If you change farther from more, how much more is it to the rest stop? That is even more ambiguous and doesn't make a ton of sense. You can still understand it, but naturally we would use farther instead of more. So like I said, it's not a perfect synonym. It just kind of helps me. If I'm really stuck, I'll try it. If it helps, it helps. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So yeah, farther and further. And those are all the words I have for you today. Remember, if you disagree with me in the comments, but please do so respectfully. Also, these are all rules, but there are also going to be exceptions to any rule. And most of these words are actually interchangeable nowadays. Cambridge Dictionary actually says that there is no difference between farther and further. You can use them interchangeably because they are essentially the same word. And although that's not technically true, it just points to the larger picture of our society and that languages change over time, and what was once true is not always going to be true in the future. Languages evolve, and I think that's true with these words as well. There's a reason why we don't use whom in sentences as much anymore. It's become irrelevant because now we use who for pretty much all. So if you say who in a sentence when you would technically use whom, nobody's going to call you out. In fact, I doubt they would even notice. And then there are words like accept and accept, which absolutely cannot be exchanged under any circumstances, but they can still be confusing. And I say all this because knowing the difference between these words can help your writing become more smooth, more consistent, and thus more enjoyable to read. You don't want to constantly be flip-flopping between two words that could confuse the reader. If your reader sees you use further here and farther there in the same way, then they're going to be thinking, well, which one's right? Readers are more perceptive than you think. So you want to be consistent. You want to finalize your style and the use of your vocabulary in a consistent way. Also, it can show that you know your stuff. I personally feel like it's important for me to understand the difference because I feel a little bit responsible as a writer to uphold the rules of language, the English language, I should say. But I also just love words, and I love their meanings, and I love etymology. I also don't think that it's that big of a deal. I'm not somebody who's going to point somebody out like the police. But yeah, that's all I have for you today. Remember to subscribe if you're interested, if you want to be a part of this community on this channel. Comment down below what words confuse you, if you've ever been confused by any of these words. If you still don't understand the meaning of the words entirely, I get it. My plan is to upload every Thursday from here on out. Again, thank you for watching. Stay creative. Bye.